The narrative of the Second World War is commonly portrayed as a conflict between opposing ideologies, with democracy pitted against fascism in a monumental struggle for humanity's future. However, beyond the imagery of uniforms, propaganda, and combat heroism lies a more pragmatic and significant truth. Wars are fundamentally driven by financial requirements. Military operations rely on substantial financial backing to sustain the movement of tanks, aircraft, and troops. Behind this financial machinery, operating in the shadows, are the bankers. These influential figures are not guided by national allegiances, but rather by financial calculations and profit motives, shaping the course of conflicts based on balance sheets and profitability rather than flags or anthems. During the Second World War, amidst its widespread destruction and loss of millions of lives, a group of financiers prospered, capitalizing on opportunities to fund both sides of the conflict. Their strategies ensured that regardless of the war's outcome, they would emerge victorious in financial terms. This shadowy financial network traces its origins back to the aftermath of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed severe reparations on Germany, leading to economic collapse and hyperinflation by 1923. International bankers, particularly from Wall Street and London, intervened in this turmoil by providing loans to stabilize the German economy. The Dawes Plan of 1924 and the Young Plan of 1929 were not merely acts of humanitarian aid. They were lucrative financial deals that enabled American banks like J.P. Morgan and Company, the Dillon Read Investment House, and others to offer credit to Germany. These loans, partly secured by German tax revenues, became crucial for the Weimar Republic's survival. However, they also laid the groundwork for Germany's industrial recovery, which ultimately fueled Hitler's military buildup during the lead-up to the Second World War. When Adolf Hitler assumed power in 1933, his economic agenda necessitated rapid rearmament, a direct violation of the Versailles Treaty. However, this rearmament drive was significantly facilitated by foreign capital and international financial collaboration. Major German industrial players like IG Farben, Krupp, and Thyssen benefited from substantial injections of foreign investments. Throughout the 1930s, American companies such as Standard Oil, General Motors, and Ford maintained close financial relationships with these German firms, enabling the flow of technology, patents, and capital across the Atlantic, even as the militaristic intentions of the Nazi regime became apparent. Ford's German subsidiary and General Motors' Opel plant contributed to the production of military vehicles for the Wehrmacht, while IG Farben, closely linked to Wall Street banks, supplied synthetic fuel and chemicals crucial for Germany's war industry. Across the English Channel, the Bank of England played a significant role in supporting German rearmament efforts. In the late 1930s, the bank's governor, Montagu Norman, maintained a cordial relationship with Hjalmar Schacht, the president of Hitler's Reichsbank. This connection led to discreet collaborations, including the transfer of gold reserves from occupied nations to Nazi authorities. One notorious incident occurred in 1939 when the Bank of England assisted in transferring Czechoslovak gold from London to the Reichsbank following Germany's occupation of Prague. This decision, made in the tense pre-war period, highlighted a disturbing reality. For many bankers, financial obligations held more weight than political or moral concerns. Simultaneously, in the United States, the financial links between American banks and companies associated with the Nazis grew stronger. The Union Banking Corporation, UBC, a New York bank, had close ties to the German industrial powerhouse, Fritz Thyssen, one of Hitler's earliest and most significant supporters. One of the directors of UBC was Prescott Bush, who later became the father of future U.S. President George H.W. Bush. In 1942, the U.S. government seized the bank's assets under the Trading with the Enemy Act. However, this action came after years of profitable operations during wartime in Europe. The complexity of wartime banking became evident when conflict in 1939 and Allied and Axis forces clashed. Neutral financial institutions, acting as intermediaries in global war finance, played a crucial role. The Bank for International Settlements, BIS, established in 1930, to handle World War I reparations and promote international banking cooperation, was a prominent player in this web. Operating from Basel, Switzerland, the BIS had directors representing both Allied and Axis nations. Throughout the war, it served as a neutral platform where central bankers from Germany, Japan, the US, and Britain could convene, despite their countries being in conflict. The BIS facilitated transactions for the Reichsbank, managing looted gold, including assets seized from occupied countries and Holocaust victims. Critics accused the BIS of supporting Nazi economic survival by offering a legal route for German assets to move internationally. Defenders argued that maintaining these banking ties was crucial for post-war reconstruction. The reality, as often seen in matters of war and finance, lay somewhere in between, primarily benefiting the banking sector stakeholders. The practice of funding both sides was often indirect, involving intricate networks of subsidiaries, foreign investments, and patent-sharing agreements that blurred the line between commerce and betrayal. For instance, Standard Oil of New Jersey maintained the supply of critical oil additives to Germany through intermediary nations well into the war. IBM's German subsidiary, Die Homag, supplied punch card technology crucial for the Nazi regime to categorize and monitor populations, including Jews marked for deportation. IBM's U.S. headquarters asserted limited oversight over its overseas branches, conveniently allowing the uninterrupted flow of profits from both Allied and Axis territories. These setups also presented opportunities for certain financiers to engage in currency manipulation and commodity trading. Gold, in particular, emerged as the ultimate safe asset, enabling banks with access to international gold markets to capitalize on opportunities regardless of which side had military dominance. Swiss banks, well known for their secrecy, gained notoriety for accepting deposits from both Nazi officials and Allied governments. This situation led to the intriguing scenario where the same vaults held the fortunes of individuals who, outside the bank's grand halls, would have been adversaries willing to go to war. The uncomfortable truth is that, for the international banking elite, wartime activities were less about ideological triumph and more about safeguarding their institutions' survival and prosperity by diversifying their investments and affiliations. These financiers strategically invested in German industries while maintaining relationships with Britain, facilitated Japanese trade through intermediaries, and secured contracts with the American government. By positioning themselves in this way, they became indispensable to all factions. This calculated neutrality underscored the resilience of capital amidst political turmoil. As the war concluded in 1945, many of these complex financial ties were discreetly swept under the rug. The imperative to reconstruct Europe through initiatives like the Marshall Plan and to integrate West Germany into the Western Alliance against the Soviet Union necessitated brushing aside inconvenient truths surrounding wartime financial collaborations. Industrialists who engaged in business with the Nazis often regained influential roles. Banks that handled questionable gold and enemy assets emerged with their reputations unscathed, ready to fund the emerging global order. Remarkably, some bankers who once dealt with Nazi officials now found themselves advising Allied governments on post-war recovery. While historical narratives often spotlight leaders, generals, and soldiers, lurking in the shadows are the men in dark suits ensuring the mechanisms of war continue to operate. Their power did not stem from commanding armies, but from regulating the financial streams that sustained those armies. The Second World War, fought under the banners of freedom and survival, also had its silent orchestrators, the bankers who, in their dual roles, supported both sides of the conflict. It served as a business venture for them, one that ultimately resulted in profits regardless of the victor's flag raised. The irony lies in the fact that the global financial system, which enabled such double dealings, did not crumble after 1945. Instead, it adapted and evolved. The interconnected nature of capital, the readiness of bankers to operate across enemy boundaries, and the idea that financial commitments surpass political loyalties hold as relevant today as they did in the tumultuous 1930s and 1940s. The key lesson from that era is stark. When conflicts erupt, banks don't pick sides. They opt for what yields profits.